Hello, respected viewers. I am George from Ireland. So this video is asking who would be the best Democratic candidate for the presidency of the United States in 2020. So we're rapidly approaching America's next presidential election, and the Democratic field, well, is whittled down to perhaps a dozen candidates, maybe half a dozen of them serious candidates, others of them polling very low, like 1 or 2%, could be effectively eliminated. So it's for over a year now, people have been debating who is going to win the Democratic Party's nomination. And they won't decide till the summer of 2020, just a few months before the election. Remember, it's the first Tuesday in November that the presidential election will take place. And obviously Donald Trump, he's the Republican president, and he's almost certainly going to get the Republican nomination. There is talk of kicking him out, of Mr. Hiking the Appalachian Trail, trying to get rid of him. And obviously Trump has then been cocking a snook at that man for having an extramarital affair. A bit rich coming from Donald Stormy Daniels Trump, with all his womanizing and all his whoring. Anyway, but Trump is almost sure to get the nomination. Put it this way, I can't think of a sitting president who did not get the nomination of his party. There's some who've chosen not to contest an upcoming election, like Lyndon Baines Johnson, but none of them has actually sought the nomination at the convention and lost it. Anyway, so back to the Democrats. So the front runner for the Democrats for a long time was Joe Biden, but he appears to have taken a tumble lately. Now, Joe Biden, he's been in politics for decades, to the better part of half a century. Of course, he was vice president under Obama for 8 years. So Joe Biden, he said he got name recognition, and that counts for a lot. Remember, that was a Trump card of Trump, for instance. So a household name. And you couldn't argue that Mr. Biden isn't sufficiently experienced. He's a grandfatherly figure. He's in his 70s. It's actually slightly older than Donald Trump. And so he appeared to be a shoo-in for it, not disliked by many people, but there have been some missteps from him. But he plagiarized a speech way back in the 80s. The British Labour Party leader, Neil Kinnock, asked, "Why am I the first king in 1,000 generations to go to university?" As in, Neil Kinnock was asking about social inequality, about access to higher education. It was a moronic thing of Kinnock to say because, you know, there have only been universities in the UK as such since the 13th century, and that's not very many generations ago. That's only more like 20 generations ago. But anyway, Biden said, "Why am I the first Biden in 1,000 generations to go to college?" So he just nicked it off Neil Kinnock. But anyway, Joe Biden, he's bonhomous. He's seen as a safe pair of hands. He's a grandfatherly figure. So people may be willing to forgive him. But he's increasingly confused. His missteps are becoming more frequent. There have been a few gaffes from him. He seems to forget what he said a minute ago, as was exposed by one of his Democratic Party rivals. Kamala Harris has taken him to task for his indulgence of white supremacists, for his opposition to busing, things like that. So his record is being gone over with a fine-tooth comb and sometimes found wanting. He's perhaps too circumspect on policy. He's not going to do enough about public funded healthcare. He's not going to do enough about affordable higher education. So he doesn't need to have any new ideas. He's a bit uninspiring, jaded. I think his best days are behind him. So maybe he's too pale, male, and stale to win this time. You can't really differentiate him from Trump in that case. Now, I know he's on an emotional even keel. He's not a vicious racist. He's not a pathological liar. But he's maybe too much of the same and too establishment. So that's why he might not get it after all. And you can't differentiate him from Trump as much, because Trump we can attack saying the guy is going senile and he doesn't know what he's saying and he's just not all there. And the trouble is, Biden doesn't appear to be entirely compos mentis either. He's not as bad as Trump in terms of cognitive decline, but he's on the way. Okay, so coming on to Bernie Sanders, the other elderly candidate. He's I'm trying to start with the plus side of each candidate. Well, what's laudable about him is he's certainly sincere. He's compassionate. He's trying to make life better for the ordinary Joe. And he is a conviction politician. He has been harping on about causes which are often deeply unpopular for decades. And he's brave enough to call himself a socialist. Hello, the latest poll on Twitter, Warren and Bernie pass Biden. Warren in the lead. This is just one poll I've seen. My goodness, Carla. Well, I'm not going to give you the rundown of the polls, though I did say that that Biden was dipping, whereas he'd been the front runner quite clearly until a couple of months ago. But Bernie Sanders is from Vermont, I believe, and Biden is from Delaware. But now Bernie, his policies are well thought through, and he's got political courage. He's unpretentious. So there are lots of things which are laudable about him. Even if you're his most implacable enemy, you got to hand it to him. He has been quite consistent, and he's done things even when that's really redounded to his electoral disadvantage. Said things. I am a socialist. That takes guts in American politics. Now, on the other side, perhaps he's too elderly. Is he frail? Too left field? Perhaps comes across as crotchety sometimes. A bit disheveled. And appearance means a lot in politics, unfortunately. It doesn't bother me, but it does bother other people. It just doesn't come across as presidential to them. That they might feel he's feeble on defence. Well, he's certainly not a warmonger. Now he said, in order to tackle climate change, we need to encourage more birth control and so on. And this is interpreted as saying he wants more abortion abroad. Well, he's definitely pro-abortion. I mean, so is Biden. But Mr. Shapiro was saying, oh, he wants disproportionately brown babies to be killed abroad. And now it is true that most people outside the United States are not white. And so that leads to more determinations, including for non-white women and so on. Now, that's a highly controversial thing. But, okay, I would certainly think there should be more contraception, including funding of it, not abortion. I don't support that. But it's true that the more people we have, the more fossil fuels we're going to burn, right? Unless we drastically reduce the burning of fossil fuels per person. And very little progress has been made on that one. So some of what he said is undeniably true. Now, you could also pillory him as a rich hypocrite. Elizabeth Warren is nearly 70 and entirely compos mentis. Well, she is. I mean, if you have a healthy diet, if you don't drink much, if you don't smoke or taking drugs or that kind of thing, if you take exercise, then your mind can be as sharp at 70 as it was at 17. The mind is not necessarily befogged by old age. But, you know, the lack of exercise, of Trump's exercise, is doing him damage. Indeed, mental exercise, reading, things like that, would keep you going. And Trump is obviously a complete heffalump, such a loafer. He won't even walk from one golf hole to the next. We'll take the golf cart, just in case he was in danger of getting a tiny bit of exercise from walking 100 yards. So Bernie, obviously, he's a millionaire. They mostly are, from his books, to say, well, I'm not against people making money, because the billionaires should have to pay a decent amount of tax so that they can help their fellow Americans. If you're really patriotic, you care about your compatriots and you're willing to do something for them. Now, I know there's some super wealthy people who show great liberality in donating to worthy causes. Trump, by the way, never gives a bean, despite his much vaunted $10 billion fortune. Bernie also be attacked for not being Zionist enough. He's got some mercy towards the Palestinians. Andrew Carnegie, well, Anne-Marie Jackson, Andrew Carnegie, you know that 19th century industrialist who famously said, a man who dies rich died disgraced. He knew what it was to thirst for knowledge and not have access to it, which is why he set up all those Carnegie libraries and Carnegie halls and so on. So because the US needs a dose of socialism. Well, I don't go that far, but it doesn't need this more aggressive capitalism where you have the poor subsidizing the rich. A massive redistribution of wealth from the poorest to the richest through taxation, through funding the war industry and so on, through bailing out the banks, through banks being able to privatize the profit and nationalize the debt, which obviously doesn't induce circumspection, because they think, well, we can just gamble again, because if the gamble pays off, wonderful. If it doesn't matter, because the government's going to bail us out. And it doesn't obviously, it's unfair the banks that were responsible and sensible. But yeah, Bernie Sanders, that's him. Remember when he was debating Hillary Clinton last time, and she was advocating for these crimes against humanity committed by Israel against the Palestinians, and Bernie was saying some of this is a bit going too far. And Hillary was saying, Israel does have a right to defend itself. Well, Palestine has a right to defend itself. It's under illegal military occupation. Democratic socialism, not straight socialism. Well, obviously what Bernie Sanders means is people are going to still have freedom of expression, multi-party democracy, all that, but there's going to be a bit more public ownership, a bit more public provision of services. It'll end up something like Norway. That would be ideal for him. Well, there's still businesses, there's still private property, people can still get rich, but the emphasis is not so much on a handful of people making staggering profits. Carnegie was a rapacious capitalist. Well, yeah, he certainly wanted to make loads of money for himself, and he did, but then he gave away a lot of his fortune. Coming on to Elizabeth Warren, who, according to many polls, is in the lead right now. So she comes from an ordinary background, a family without much money, and they went through straitened circumstances in her childhood when her father was too ill to work. Her mother, a housewife, had to go out for work for the first time. There were 4 children in the family. And Elizabeth Warren, she comes from the Midwest. She dropped out of college at 19 to get married, felt that she couldn't both be a wife, a mother, and an undergraduate, and went back to education later in life. So she's, she had a tough upbringing, and I suppose the average American can maybe identify with that. It's staggering to see so many working class people worship the super rich, and people who didn't make it on their own, like Trump, who inherited hundreds of millions of dollars, think that we should idolize this person. But this person who pretends to care about you could easily care about you and help you and give away money to, maybe not you personally, but to causes like hospitals or something, and doesn't. But you'd rather vote for that kind of incredibly avaricious person than you would for someone from an ordinary background who's not that rich, who's actually trying to help working class people, as Elizabeth Warren is, by let's have more publicly funded services, as in healthcare. So she's caring, she's not too dressy, so perhaps the ordinary person can identify her in that sense. She's unspun, and she's in politics because she's trying to serve the public. She's an effectual public speaker, and she's been responsible for some drone strikes against the Republicans, and some businessmen saying, oh, I made all this money on my own. And she said, but wait a second, your workers were educated in publicly funded schools. You sent your goods to market on publicly funded roads, and you expect the courts to adjudicate contracts, they're publicly funded, and the police to protect you, they're publicly funded, and the fire department and all the rest of it, and the military and all this. So nobody makes it completely on their own, and so you owe the community something. You can't say that you ask nothing of the public, you do ask something from them. Now, on the other hand, she's perhaps too schoolmarmish. Is she too serious, too bland, dowdy? Does she talk down to people don't want to be lectured to? She said that she's got Native American ancestry, which she does, but not very much. And when she got a job at a university in Texas, she said she was a minority hire, and people say that's stretching the truth. She's been lampooned by Trump as Pocahontas, which I think a lot of Native Americans will find mortally offensive. So maybe she's too left on health and education for some people. So she's got her disadvantages. And then coming on to Kamala Harris, this woman, she's very polished, she's stylish, she's got a very confident delivery. She's obviously an ethnic minority woman, half black and half Indian, as in from India, not Native American. She's a high achiever, Solicitor General of California and so on. So she's got well-considered policies. She's certainly well presented. Look how she dresses. On the other hand, people might say she's overdressed. She strikes me as arrogant. I know you need a bit of ego to go into politics, but the other candidates that I've mentioned don't come across that way to me. I know you have to have some self-assurance, or you're simply not going to put your head above the political parapet. But she's different from the others, I think. Now, she married in her 50s, and she's childless, which doesn't bother me. So is it still going?
I can't tell.
Yes. Sorry, I was interrupted by a phone call there. God, these telemarketing people from Russia. Anyway, so it doesn't bother me that she has no children, but I'm sure that'll be used against her very unfairly. Some bigots will say, oh, you don't have children, you don't care about the future, and so on. Now, people marry or don't marry, it doesn't bother me. I'm not a family values person. They have loads of children, they have no children, they have children when they're not married, they're married and don't have children. I don't care. I'm not trying to promote a particular lifestyle. I do think people shouldn't have too many children because it's bad for the planet. I think Trump's faulty, but Hillary Clinton gives me the creeps. Well, a lot of people of moderate opinion loathed Hillary Clinton, and so there were two candidates, very high negatives, Trump and Hillary Clinton. So if the Democrats had picked a more neutral candidate, then they would have won. I mean, they almost won anyway. They won the popular vote, obviously. But what's her name? Hillary Clinton, she inspires a visceral hatred in tens of millions of people. Some independents who would otherwise vote Democrat voted against her. Then some Republicans who don't mind some Democrats, but absolutely detest Hillary Clinton. Hillary Rodham Clinton, should I call her? Remember how she dropped the Rodham for a while? She's quite a feminist in the 90s. give it using her maiden name. Then she said, oh, that's putting off middle America, so I won't do that, come across as too feminist. Anyway, back to Kamala Harris. Is she overdressed? Some people would use that against her. It's difficult because you want to be seen as presentable. On the other hand, say, oh God, look, she's so rich. Name a moderate on each side. Goodness, well, I suppose Joe Biden would be regarded as a moderate. Well, John Boehner on the Republican side would have been seen as a moderate, but he's out now. Moderates in the Republican side perhaps in short supply. I mean, perhaps Mitt Romney, although he claimed to have been severely conservative when he went for the presidency. But remember, when he was governor of Massachusetts, he brought in something very similar to the Affordable Care and Patient Protection Act, better known as Obamacare, by its foes who attempted to drag it down by associating it with Obama. Okay, so that's Kamala Harris. And she has attacked Joe Biden more than anybody else. Okay, Pete Buttigieg. And some people have problems with his name. It's really not that difficult, right? If you just think of edge, okay, because he's a Maltese American. So he's the youngest of the candidates. How old is he? Is he 37? He's from the Midwest. So you can say he was mayor of that town, South Bend, Indiana. It's a red state. So he's done well. He's prospered in hostile territory. Been a fairly successful mayor of the town for several years now. So he's a super high achiever academically at Harvard. He won a Rhodes Scholarship to Oxford University. There are about 45 of those scholarships to the United States every year. So very prestigious. All your fees are paid, and you're given money to live off. So loads of top people like Bill Clinton have won them in the past. So, and also he was in the military. He served in Iraq. So, not Iraq, sorry, forgive me, Afghanistan. And he's a polyglot, speaking 7 languages. He's also self-effacing. He acknowledges that he doesn't have mastery of all those 7 languages. He's approachable and says, you can call me Mayor Pete if you can't cope with my surname. I suppose he got used to people being unable to pronounce it. So he's gay, and unfortunately there's still some anti-gay prejudice that will tip some people against him. You could say he's inexperienced. He's only been mayor of a not very large town. He didn't get to be chairman of the Democratic National Committee. They're going to try to pillory him as an ivory tower intellectual type. Yes, he's intelligent. Yes, he's highly educated. But he's done real things. Obviously, he's been a management consultant, not just an academic. And as I say, he was in the military and he fought. He could very easily have avoided those things. He didn't need it for education. He did it out of a sense of public service. So he's not a wimp or a pansy, as I suppose his enemies are going to try to paint him. So people say he's too circumspect on policy, that really he's just full of hot air. He's a charmer. The substance isn't there. He tends to dodge difficult issues. He doesn't want to be trapped into supporting a policy he may then want to get out of. Like on the slavery issue, saying, oh, what about reparations? Buttigieg has a lot more pertinent experience than the orange ogre. Well, yes, he does. I mean, come on, anyone would be better than the orange orangutan. So on the slavery issue, saying, oh, well, I haven't seen a model I can work with. Well, come up with a model then. You're meant to be the ideas man. And then when it came to abortion, trying to say, oh, well, it's between a woman and her doctor. Well, why does a doctor get to make a decision? Isn't the woman's decision? Okay, so is this person, is a fetus a human being or not? What do you think? It matters, because if a fetus is a human being, then the government's got to be involved, because we're trying to save people's lives. If it's not a human being, if you believe a human fetus is not human, say so. So he's a bit silver-tongued, or trying to avoid committing himself. But yeah, there are good things about him. If he doesn't make it this time, he's got a very big future in American politics. He's going to be around for a long time. And there don't appear to be any skeletons in his cupboard. I mean, so those are the real front runners. People are talking about Beto O'Rourke, that politician from Texas, a very lanky chap, and people tend to vote for the taller person. We just associate that with leadership. Or Andrew Yang, a Chinese-American self-made millionaire who wants this guaranteed national income. Certainly an eye-catching idea, but he's never stood for political office. There are various other candidates like Cory Booker, Julian Castro, and on and on. But anyway, I used to think Biden-Harris would be the dream ticket, although they've slightly fallen out, and I think Biden should be out of contention, actually. So possibly Elizabeth Warren, but does she have that broad an appeal? And who, as a running mate, someone like Peter Buttigieg, or Bernie Harris, either one of those would be okay. You want to balance youth and experience, a balanced ticket from different parts of the country. I'd be fine with a woman as president and vice president, but that would be too much for some people. So if you're trying to maximize the Democrats' chance of winning, only have one woman on the ticket, or two ethnic minority people, absolutely fine by me. But I realize for some people that would be too much, would be too radical. But I think they should have at least one woman and at least one ethnic minority person. Obviously, Kamala Harris is both. Do you have a preference, or you're very bright? I suspect that you have good instincts and heaps of knowledge. Peter Clark, well, I try. Maybe Elizabeth Warren. I mean, I wouldn't warm to her, wouldn't want to chat to her that much. But she's very genuine. I saw her cracking open a beer whilst giving an interview on Skype. So she's not someone who's trying to have this slick PR, who's all about being scripted. And she's not too afraid to express her opinion. Well, Hillary Clinton was just preternaturally cautious. Hello, 4:51 a.m. here. Good morning. Where are you? Said Wood. So now they only actually get to select the presidential candidate. Is the US political class going to allow Trump to evade justice when he leaves office? I sincerely hope not. I think obviously a lot of his Republican backers will ban him. He can't argue executive privilege. Cracked a beer, as in open the tinnies. That's what I saw Elizabeth Warren do. But then people say, oh, she's an alcoholic or something like that. So the Republican Party might round on him. Remember, a lot of Republican grandees absolutely savaged him when he was going for the nomination, like Mitt Romney saying, a promise from Donald Trump is as worthless as a degree from Trump University. But when Trump was safely ensconced in the White House, he suddenly forgot all that, Mitt Romney. And Mitch McConnell, he was lambasting Trump. Trump was excoriated by Ted Cruz saying you're a sniveling coward, which Trump certainly isn't. But then he started kowtowing to Trump. Here in Iowa, Heartland today, Rockies in a few days. Oh, good for you. Paul Ryan, likewise. So these guys, they've got no backbone. They've got no courage. They're completely bereft of moral principles. And they will just do anything to suck up to him. They will crawl before Trump. They will do obeisance to Trump. So you saw them abasing themselves before him when they were wanting his patronage. So I very much would like to see Trump in an orange jumpsuit spending the rest of his days in Guantanamo Bay. But that's too much to hope for. So, okay, so the party only picks the presidential candidate. The vice presidential candidate is then chosen by that presidential candidate. He or she picks anyone. The party doesn't get a say. So whoever gets the presidential candidacy, let's say it's Joe Biden, could pick someone I haven't mentioned today, someone I haven't heard of. I think Joe Biden can stand against Trump. I see. Well, he wouldn't do terribly anyway. But almost any of these people look like they would beat Trump. But, you know, over a year to go, a week is a long time in politics, so said Harold Wilson. And a lot could happen, a war against Iran, the economy could pick up, or a recession, or whatever. But there could be some bright news on the horizon for Donald J. Trump. Remember, when John McCain in 2008 selected Sarah Palin as a running mate, most people had never heard of her. I am a follower of the American political scene, as you may have deduced from my numerous videos, but I'd never heard her name. She was governor of Alaska. So there could be somebody who's not been mentioned thus far who gets to be the vice presidential candidate. The VP replacement is a miserable way. Biden has no chance, I see. So there we are. And who's most likely to get it? I don't think Biden's chances are nil. I think they're still fairly good, actually. Things could pick up. People could overlook or forget his mistakes. Bernie, Elizabeth Warren, and Kamala Harris, they're the only serious ones. I don't think Buttigieg is going to get it, but he certainly nailed his colours at the mast. He's enhanced his reputation. He's drawn a lot of media coverage that he didn't have a few months ago. Beto O'Rourke, Andrew Yang, almost certainly not, possibly vice presidential candidacy. Beto O'Rourke, who ran Ted Cruz so close in that US senatorial race. By the way, obviously, Texas has been fairly safe territory for the Republican Party for well over 20 years. They haven't had a Democrat governor since that Annie Richards in the early 90s, the one who preceded George W. Bush. But now it's in the toss-up pile. I think the Republicans will still carry it, but not by much. It's too close for comfort. The Republicans previously thought they didn't have to seriously campaign there. They could take it for granted, but they can't anymore. Because you know, they've been run very close by the Democrats. I personally would not want Biden, but will vote for Trump just to get rid of Trump. Okay, vote for Biden. Okay, has Trump got a snowballs in hell's chance? Yes, he does. Now, Trump is polling about 41%. His disapproval rate's about 53%. Now, that's well below historic average. Nevertheless, Ronald Reagan was doing worse in 1984. but yet went on to be re-elected handsomely, got 60% of the vote against 40% for Walter Mondale. So much depends on what happens. I think Trump will lose. I'm not sure that he'll lose. What chance do I give Trump of being re-elected? About 40%. Obviously, there's a lot riding on what happens in the next year and 2 months, as I said, and what transpires at the Democrats' convention. Who do they pick? So you want somebody who's credible and who's not got an obvious weakness. Play it safe, fairly cautious, and that's why I think sometimes people thought that Biden's the safe candidate. No Democratic candidate would be good. The Democrats want to turn the US into Spain or Greece, or dare I even say Venezuela. Ha, ha, ha. They might want to turn it into Denmark. Okay, the Democrats are mostly rounded on the Venezuelan government. They're not trying to take away people's freedom of expression or not have real elections. It's in fact the Republicans who like to cheat. Texas will inevitably go below to immigration. And isn't that wonderful? Roll on whites as a minority. Then the white supremacists will be really fucked over. Where are you going to go, white supremacists? Why do you move to the South Pole? It's white enough for you. Never can call it too early. It's too many variables. And who gets indicted over the 70,000 and counting? Yeah, so that's that. I think the Democrats will win it. The demographics are moving their way. There may well be a recession on the horizon. Democrats can't be complacent. Yeah, there's still everything to play for. All right, that's me. So please donate to me on Patreon to sustain this channel financially. I teach people online all humanities subjects, including French, English as a foreign language, things like that. And I'm a tour guide in London, so contact me if you wanted a guided tour. You can direct message me here. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and indeed, what's the other thing I'm on? Twitter. That's all. Goodbye.